Talofa, and welcome to our second annual Women Empowerment Summit, sponsored by the Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources. Our theme Pacific Women, Gender Equity, and Racism. My vision of this summit began from a lens of inequality and inequity. The ways that success has been defined in my experiences has been role modeled by women. The women in my life that helped me to dream big, to desire a future of independence from a man, but to look for a man who understands that my worth is more than my outer beauty. It is my independence that empowers me to become the woman I was born to be. It was not about power or control, nor was it about demonstrating who wore the pants or who was the boss in the relationship. It was about more than that. And until I was an adult myself, did I connect the experiences of my grandmother and mother of alcohol abuse, mental emotional abuse, fear, and infidelity to the reasons why it was important for them to raise my sister and I to be the strong, independent women from the Pacific Island. Their experiences entailed that of their mothers and grandmothers of submissiveness, humility, respect, and obedience. Their role as women was to care for their family, their homes, and their children. And their assumption of their role was that once they became a mother and a wife, that was their only purpose. For decades as women, we have been taught that in our culture, roles, and responsibilities, it was also shared with me when wanting to return to school that it is not my purpose, that I should stay home and take care of my children and my husband and make sure that my home was clean and that meals were cooked for my family when they returned home from school and work. Although I understand that this is my part of my responsibility as a mother and wife, my upbringing again defined that role differently. I had many people who would ask me, "Why are you going to school? Who takes care of your kids?" Comments like, "Poor Lee, my husband, he has to watch your kids." Or, "So what? Your parents watching your kids now? That's not their job. You decided to have kids when you were young. That's your job." It was a hard decision for me to continue pursuing my degree and then continuing on to a master's and EDD program. So many nights I would question my decision and question my status as a mother and would fall into a depression thinking about every way I was failing my children because of my selfish decision and desire to better myself. Even though that decision was based on my desire to provide a better life and future for my family. At the end of my graduate program, so much had changed, and my marriage felt like it was suffering. Because as a couple, my husband and I were not prepared for these very different shared roles that we grew up understanding were not meant to be shared. We struggled, but we are making it through, and we are so grateful that we survived the trauma of this cultural struggle of gender roles and responsibilities. It is a constant conversation, which I will also say is an area we could improve on in our cultural practice. Through this journey, now in a position where I can provide better for my children, gender equity and equality continue to be a barrier due to systemic and institutional racism. Many have heard my story as the chief of operations at an FQHC in Hawaii, being asked because of the stereotype of colored women at a table of executive directors who are all male if I was the new secretary to the male ED sitting next to me. I have also shared the experience in Washington, D.C. as a PI advocate being asked by a white male executive who felt like he had to speak in a broken English accent if I was attending the National Community Health Center Advocacy on the Hill event to share my experiences as an immigrant and a consumer board member. As he continued to speak, he asked me, "Where do you come from?" And I said, "From Hawaii." He asked, "Yes, but where were you born?" I replied, "In Hawaii." As the conversation went on, I didn't feel the need to explain anything more, so we went on our way. In one of the sessions that I was speaking in, they introduced me with the usual Western introduction, with all the academic accomplishments represented by the letters after a person's name and title of COO. I replied, um, I replied, "Would that have made a difference in our conversation?" He said, "Why didn't you tell me that you were the COO?" And I said, Would that have made a difference in our conversation? He was speechless, then said, "Oh, no, not at all. Just that I made an assumption that." I quickly stopped him from embarrassing himself anymore and said, "It's okay. A lot of people make dumb assumptions." They feel they need to apologize for some reason after, but it's okay because I usually don't ever work with them again. I share this because the existing climate in our world today of racism and the awareness that the pandemic has created around social and health inequity may not be new to PI community members. However, for many, it is not recognized how much the impact of this racism exists within our own culture, our families, our community as a whole. This conference exists to provide a safe space for these conversations, to bring more awareness for individuals to reflect on their own experiences and recognize how these sometimes taboo topics have impacted our lives, and what can we do to change our perspective to find better resolutions in addressing this struggle. It is going to be a process. It's going to require humility. It is going to require expectations of change, and not all at once. Again, this will be a process. Today, with the stories being shared, we invite you to begin this process by having an open mind and empathy, as we require that this space to share is safe, that stories and people are not judged but respected. The women on our program today are real Pacific Island women who I am sure we will be able to find connection with. Their stories will empower you to either find your purpose from your journey thus far in life, provide hope in a situation you may be in, or motivate and inspire you to act on engagement in your community.